Hello, it's good to be here. I wasn't sure if there would be a screen in front of me, so this is really handy for me. I love technology, although I'm not very good at it. As long as people do it for me, I'm fine. I am very proud to say that I am a nurse. I graduated in June of 1962. So that says I've been a nurse for 60 years and I'm still working. I haven't burned out, so evidently I'm not going to burn out. I still work at a college of nursing in South Dakota with Native American student nurses. What a wonderful way to wind up a career, to work with my own tribe, to help our own students learn to become a nurse. What I do as a mentor is to teach who they are, as many of the children today don't know who they are. Not through any fault of their own, they just did not have the opportunity to be taught. So that's one of the things that I do with student nurses, and our student population has quadrupled since our program started 6 years ago. And I think it's because there's 4 of us now, 4 Native women, strong Native women with a passion for what we do. And that's how I look at this group of people. Except there's a lot more than 4. And that's hopeful, isn't it? It's hopeful for the future of our children. So my talk is going to be about a personal story, just like the gentleman from White Mountain Apache just said, a journey, personal journey. So I started living. I was born in Pine Ridge, delivered by my grandma and aunties. And so that would be part of my story as far as nutrition is concerned. Today, what we ate is called organic, right? That's what we had back then. I was born in 1939, so that's a very long time ago. To now realize that the way we were eating kept us healthy. And that's what I attribute my current health, is because of the way I had a beginning. And I have my ancestors to thank for that. And then I went to Pine Ridge boarding school as a kindergartner, and it was hard. I went through all the trauma that so many of our elders have been through, but I survived it. And then we moved to Rapid City, South Dakota, after my father came home from World War II, couldn't find work on the reservation, and he must have heard there was a possibility of work in Rapid City, so we moved there. So I will start by telling you where Pine Ridge is. Rapid City is up there in the upper right, left corner with a circle around it. That's where I live and work today. And Pine Ridge Reservation is outlined in there down below in green, light green. And the larger circle is Manderson District, where my mom was from. Eva, killed on horseback, was her maiden name. And the smaller circle is Kyle, and that was where my father was from. They met and married and had many children, and I'm the oldest daughter, and many of you are the oldest daughter. So you know what that means. It means you just inherit the sense of responsibility because you're given responsibility, and so that is part of who I am in my personal journey. So in Manderson, the White River runs through the district, and we lived near the White River. And Mani means water, Shota or Shosha means alkaline base or cloudy or white. And you'll see a picture here of the White River. This is what I remember. We lived in Manderson. My grandparents had a home, And so we lived in an extended family type of a setting. Grandma, Grandpa, Lala Anuji had the central house, and we essentially had sleeping rooms or sleeping houses around it. And so that's where we all gathered in the mornings, was at the main place, main house. I wanted to tell a story about my grandpa. We called him Lala. He was just so awesome looking to me. He was tall and lean. Back in those days, we didn't have obesity, and we all know why, don't we? He was tall and lean, dark brown face, deep wrinkles, and he held himself so erect. And we used to enjoy watching him get on his horse to go to the Masopi, which is a store, Sharp's Corner. It's still there. And he had a horse that was very active. It was just ready to go. And so when we heard that Lala was going to the store, we all gathered at the top of the hill to watch him saddle the horse down below where the corrals were. And it was just like a drama, because that horse is ready to go. And he would just talk to it in Lakota. You know, he just kept saying, whoa, whoa. And it was like a buildup of a drama. And when he finally put the saddle on, he had the horse started circling, and he had to go after it and cinch it. And when he put his foot in that stirrup, it took off, running down that road toward the White River with a trail of dust as his other leg went over. So that was a story that we all remember as his grandchildren. He was our teacher. Every morning at dawn, he would sing the morning prayers. And of course, in Lakota, in our way of praying, it's not rote. You know, it's not like the Our Father or things like that. It was whatever he felt like praying about that day. And so it was interesting. But he made it even more interesting for us as children, was that he would start drumming first. Just when the light is turning in the morning. It's a beautiful time of the day if you're a morning person. And as the light is breaking, he would start drumming. And in those days, we were obedient children. We didn't say things today like you hear a little one saying, "But Mom," you know, arguing whatever, but we didn't. That was not part of our culture. We had this deep respect for our elders. And so he would start drumming for a few minutes. And if you can imagine that as a child waking up to drumming, his hand drum. And then he would wait a few minutes while drumming. He was probably thinking to himself, well, they should all be awake by now. And then he would start his prayer. And it wasn't talking, it was singing. So that's even more pleasant to hear as a child, to hear your Lola singing prayers. Beautiful words in our Lakota language, acknowledging the nature of what we had, acknowledging this river for supplying water and fish. And when he finished the prayers, he would drum some more. And then he would start singing a story about one of our values. So I learned my 7 Lakota values listening to stories that were interesting. For instance, you might tell a story about someone who demonstrated generosity, fortitude, courage, wisdom, honor, respect, and humility. We heard those over and over. Different stories, very interesting stories. You know how he was a good storyteller. And of course, it's known that that's how we learned early on in our history, is through storytelling. And when you think about it, when you think about the stories, it's not necessarily telling you the answer straight out like the linear way we learn today. It was a circular way of teaching. So that taught us how to be critical thinkers, inductive and deductive reasoning. It taught us to think. And so that was the way I was educated early on. And then at the end, not every time, but it was usually in the morning, he would stop the drumming and the singing of the story. And of course, he didn't ask for questions or anything. There was no Q&A, you just figured it out yourself. For clarification, you figure it out. And then every once in a while, he would say, "Nivo Lakota hekiksi apo," just loud, remember who you are. And so and then he did it at night again, at dusk. He would start drumming until we all went in the houses, and then he would sing the evening prayers, beautiful words, again, singing. And then when he finished the evening prayers, he would sing another story. We looked forward to those stories because they were interesting, and it taught us how to be, as well as Lakota children. So that was my background. He also taught us different things besides our values and how to be Lakota. You see this picture, it's the White River, and it's white because it's alkaline soil. And there's a beach there. He would take this wagon with this huge barrel, wooden barrel, pulled by horses. And he would teach us that to dig holes on that beach about 3 feet deep and about 2 feet in diameter. He taught us that. And there was continuous teaching, taught us what 3 feet is and 2 feet in diameter. We have the words for that. And so that he taught us, and we were quiet and listened. So we would dig the holes, and then he told us, "We will come back in 2 or 3 days, and the water will be clear, because the sand is a filter." And of course, that was fascinating to us, how we would see that cloudy water going by, and then when we come back, we would have our clear water for drinking and cooking and washing. So that's part of how I remember my childhood, the first 6 years. And they always say that the first 7 years is your age of learning who you are, age of reason. You reach your age of reason at 7. But it seems as if the way they taught us about storytelling, teaching us about thinking, that we reach the age of reason far before age 7. My grandmother had a garden, and this is our diet in those days. We had fish and wildlife and vegetables from the garden, berries that we were sent out to pick. That was part of living in a communal setting, is that you work. It's not, you don't just play as children. You had your duties. And with each teaching of a duty, they taught us more than one thing. They just taught us more than the values, for instance, and how to be Lakota. So my grandma, for instance, when she was going to fix the soup for the day, that's how we lived. We had soup every day. I still love my soup every day. She would tell me, for instance, in Lakota, pick 6 carrots. And early on, she would say 6, and she would do this. After a while, I realized what that was. And then she would say, "And you know to teach the younger siblings," she didn't say siblings, but and all in Lakota, teach your younger brothers and sisters the process of picking vegetables from the garden. So it wasn't just a simple task. We were given responsibility to care for our younger siblings in terms of knowing what to do correctly. So we would go down to the garden and very carefully pick whatever she asked us to. But by the spirituality of all of this that she was teaching us was when she said, you know what to do, she told us we would teach your siblings what to do. And that thing was to put something back, a pebble or a piece of a leaf or a weed, and then put it in the hole that you made where you pulled that carrot out and put something back in and put the soil back in, and there's a prayer for that, to thank Unjimakha, showing respect to Mother Earth, Grandmother Earth. And so that's the way she taught us. And she taught us how to ride bareback. She's the one that taught us to do that. She said, just grab the mane or the hair of the horse and pull yourself up. We didn't use bridles or saddles back in those days. And we would go. My horse's name was Little Red. I had a younger sister who was very fragile, kind of little girl. And so her horse was a very slow one. His name was Bushel Belly. He had a big belly and moved slow. And so we had my personal journey in my early years, formative years, were full of lessons on how to be what I am today. When I went to boarding school, it was Pine Ridge Indian Boarding School. This one is a very early picture from 1891, but you could see how families followed their children and camped near where those dormitories are, to be near the children. They didn't want them there. They were taken forcibly. I went there because we moved to Pine Ridge after my father went off to World War II, and we had to go to school. So this is where I went. And the picture there with the children weeding the garden was what I remember as a kindergartner, of learning how to pull the right weeds out. And so half of our day was physical labor. And it was not a happy time, but I survived it because I know who I am. My grandpa taught us who we are. And I always remember what he used to say. It was in my mind. And so they didn't break me. After the boarding school experience, we moved to Rapid City. After World War II, my dad came home and couldn't find work in Pine Ridge. So they must have heard that, because I was, I don't know, about 9 or so, must have heard that there was work possibility in Rapid City. And the Indian camp is outlined in red here, and that blue line is Rapid Creek. And in history, that's where our people used to camp for different reasons. It's a good place to go at certain seasons. And so we lived there in tents like this. This is what I remember living in Rapid City. And those of you who have studied the poverty, culture of poverty, that's what we were living in. But we never complained because we were taught to be resilient. And obviously we are. Look at what you are today. You're resilient people. And so we were always either too hot, too cold, too wet, hungry, but we did not complain, because to me, what we were recalling and not necessarily saying it was, they're not going to take you down. So uh, this was during the 40s and 50s. And so we lived there. And the very first time, and of course it was poverty, so we were partially hungry at all times. None of us were overweight and ate little. And those of us older ones would eat little so that the younger ones could have more. Just somehow we knew that they needed it for growth and development. And so, see, those stories that were saying to us taught us this. You take care of your people. And to me, that meant at that stage of my life to take care of the young ones. So that was one way of showing generosity or fortitude, whatever it was, that I felt like I was demonstrating my values as a Lakota kid. We also had fun there, actually. The Rapid Creek is just right behind those tents. And somehow we got inner tubes and we would float down the river. And then my parents said, remember, just you go just so far because you have to walk back. And so we knew where to stop and come back on foot. And we did not have a feeling of a marginalization necessarily there because we were surrounded by Lakota people. We were all in the same boat. But racism was alive and well. Because the very first time that I went downtown with my dad, I was 9, knew how to read, and walked down the street, I was excited to be in Rapid City for the first time. And in a store window, I saw a sign that said, "No Indians allowed." And so I stopped short, and my dad was holding my hand, so he stopped too, and he said, "Taku." And I pointed to the sign. He hadn't seen it yet because it was low to the ground where I could see it easily. I said, "Doc, where? Why?" And he said something very wise. He said, "Because they don't know us." The problem is they still don't know us. But they're beginning, and it's because of us that they will learn who we are as we grow in strength, like this group, learning, sharing, and helping each other, no matter in what circumstance, and keep us from this kind of living, if possible. That's just Rapid City scene. I like that. Remember who you are. Hechetu, Dakiapi.